All right, now we got it. Okay. Oh, now it's going to get really complicated. I have utterly no idea how to do this part. Okay, here we go. All right. More or less, okay. Thank you, Don. All right. I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. Thank you for being here. I always tell people that I enjoy it when I look out and I see people here, because I think to myself, you brought your sincerity here today and you brought your goodness here today, and I hope that your sincerity and goodness will be rewarded. Because what I feel when I come into this room is a little bit of blessing. You know, I feel kind of good in this room, and even when the room was under construction, it felt pretty good in here. And so I'm really happy whenever I come in here and then see other people coming in here. And I hope that you derive from being in this room at least as much as I do from being in here myself. So I want to thank you for coming. And I also want to thank all of the volunteers who make all of this possible. Because without the volunteers here, there would be no program, there would be no support team. Everyone you see here is a volunteer. And so just when you see someone in the library, working in the library, or teaching in the classes, or cleaning up in the kitchen, make sure you thank them, because what they're doing is making it possible for us to present these programs on Sunday for everyone. And so I really appreciate it. It's just I'm having a gratitude attack. It happens on a regular basis. And as you can see, we're getting ready for the Tibetan New Year behind me, because there is a Tibetan cultural tradition before the New Year of cleaning one's home and spiffing it up a little bit, if you might say, making more offerings, making larger offerings. And so you'll see this Losar, or New Year's shrine, slowly coming together over the next week. We'll try and send pictures to our Facebook page so you can see how it's progressing. But because the Tibetan society was an agrarian society, you'll see many references to an agrarian life. That there'll be wheatgrass, for example, on the shrine, and there's an animal, like the head of a sheep, which is symbolic of plenty, and the idea that animals help us in our life and give us things that we need. And so when you're living as a nomad, you need wool, and they give that to you, as well as milk and so on. So you'll see some of these interesting symbols from the agrarian Tibetan cultural past is that we've brought here as a way of helping people to understand where we come from. Where does our teaching and where does our practice come from? This is especially going to be useful at the end of February, when Lama Tom teaches his class on the life and songs of Tibet's great saint, Milarepa. Because Milarepa came from Tibet and from a well-to-do family that was nonetheless an agrarian, well-to-do family. They had their own land and crops and so on. And disaster befell him, and then it's talking about the journey he made from having been enslaved by his relatives after the death of his father to carrying out a revenge plot by his mother. Yes, it's Shakespearean. And then what happens when he feels remorse for assisting with the revenge, and how he then goes into the barren mountains of Tibet, high up into the thin air of the highlands in Tibet, over 10,000 feet, and practices meditation, gains Buddhahood, and then begins to express his realization through song. He sings. And so we're going to have a lot of fun talking about how the mountains of Tibet gave birth to one of the great masters of our tradition. So we're going to have some fun talking about how we who live here on the flatlands can associate and work with the people who lived in the mountains. So we'll start today's discussions with the refuge prayer, which is on the front side of that you have here. What we'll do is we'll recite it 2 times in English, and the third repetition will be sung in the Tibetan language. And you see the transliteration is there in red. You can listen along. So we'll dedicate this session to all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Okay. O Sanjay Chudan Sochi Chonamla Jang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suchi Daji Jinso Jibe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sanjay Druparsho. Okay, thank you. I'll recite a short prayer of my own, and then we'll begin. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Tagi Chiwar Pede Ten Shula Kadrin Jembo Gone Je Sonte Kusum Tugging a Drip Sal to Soul. Okay, thanks very much. All right. I have this fear of losing my hearing aid. I'm still getting used to them, and so it's a process. We're going to put it that way. So today's talk, although I realize now I probably should have talked about the Tibetan New Year, I will say 2 more things about it, and then I'll go into my topic, which is meditation. It's customary at the turning of the year to kind of clean up one's own sort of life and affairs. And I'll put up on our Facebook page this week last year's pre-Losar teaching. It's called Cleaning the Silver. And basically last year I had a wild idea, and I sat in front of everybody here and I cleaned my silver while I was talking. And so I accomplished 2 things. I actually had something to talk about, and I was able to finish my pre-Losar cleaning of my shrine bowls. But a lot of people do that because it's a fresh start. Whether you have your fresh start at January 1st, when the Western calendar gives us a new year, or whether you get your fresh start on the lunar new year, which in this case is February 10th, this coming Saturday. Whether you get your reboot on any of those days, I feel like what's important for us to remember is that we always have the option to have a reboot. We don't have to wait for the calendar to tell us it's time to reboot. And there are so many ways that we can reboot. We can make promises to ourselves and then try to keep them. I have to exercise more, but that's not a secret. But we can eat right, exercise more, try to get more sleep, and do all of those things that give us better physical health. But we can also do things that give us better mental and emotional and spiritual health as well, better habits of thinking, shall we say. And this I think is kind of the best thing that we can do. Next week, we're going to start our New Year's celebration with a cleansing outdoor incense offering on Friday evening at 6:30, I think. And you'll be able to participate in that if you wish. And then right after that, we'll be reciting the mantra and practice of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of Compassion. The whole thing will probably take about an hour and a half. And I hope the weather is good for us. Then after this cleansing outdoor incense offering, then on Saturday, the New Year, we'll start at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, and we'll recite the practice and mantra of the feminine aspect of compassion, Tara. She's called the swift one without fear. And her practice is associated with removing obstacles and gaining fearlessness. And so I figure removing obstacles and gaining fearlessness is a great way to start the year. So we will start with that. And then I think I may have just like a brief Dharma talk, but it's going to be kind of a simpler practice, but you're welcome to come because it's going to be very beautiful. I think you saw in the newsletter, we're going to be offering like flower offerings this year, so the shrine will look extra magnificent with flowers and so on. And then on the following day, we have what we call Losar Sunday. Losar Sunday is always the Sunday after the New Year. And it's when our volunteer year begins, because it's supposedly good feng shui. If you think there's a feng shui associated with time, it's a time of beginnings, and so it's a time that it's good to begin new things and so on. So we begin our volunteer year. Therefore, we will, instead of a regular Dharma talk next week at this time, we'll be honoring and applauding for our volunteers, and we will be honoring the volunteers who are coming in for the new year and starting their assignments on the new year. And so it will take about maybe half an hour, and then we will have what we like to call the New Year's offerings, in which we'll come up and do a Tibetan agrarian greeting to the new year by taking a pinch of wheat berries and tossing them in the air as an offering, taking a pinch of roasted barley flour, which is the Tibetan staple food, and tossing it in the air and wishing for abundance and blessing for everyone for the new year. And then there'll be an offering and so on. And so we'll be doing that, and there'll be cake. I am told there will be cake, which is great, because after people go through because we'll have like a little procession, a little blessing line where people go in front of the shrine and receive blessings, and I'll be there with one of the statues from our shrine. I'll try not to make it the big heavy one, and I'll touch you on the top of the head as a blessing because the reason that Tibetans use this method of conveying blessing by statues and so on is because each statue is actually filled with mantras, and there's a small packet of relics right behind the heart of the statue. And these relics could be of a great master. These relics could be even from the Buddha himself. So the idea is that these objects are going to give us a blessing for the new year. So if that's something that you feel comfortable participating in, you certainly can. And if not, that's okay. We have very comfortable seating, and you can just observe. And so that will be our Losar Sunday for next week. So I wanted to at least say a few things about it, so that when you came next week, even though things will look a little different and our 11:30 talk will be a little shorter than usual, there will be cake. I'm just saying. So thank you for indulging me in discussing Losar a bit. Now let's get back to our given topic for today, which is meditation in the three paths of Buddhism. Those of you who have seen the other talks in this series know that I had 2 previous talks, and this is part 3. In the 2 previous talks, I introduced the way the Buddha taught and why he taught the way he did. He taught in a very elementary way when he first started teaching, because not everybody was going to understand the principles that he was going to talk about. He was going in a world in which everyone felt that there was selfhood, and that everyone had a permanent soul that went through lifetime after lifetime. The Buddha said, nah, that's not how I experienced my mind when I became enlightened. That's what he said. This is not how I experienced myself. Instead, he said, I experienced my mind not as a material soul that doesn't change, but as a dynamic process that goes through time, taking rebirth in every moment. See, and I was talking about reboots a minute ago, and you're going to find out more about reboots in a moment. The Buddha instead of calling himself a self, he called himself a stream of being, which is really makes me happy as an English, I'm a word nut. And anything with an ing on the end of it makes me happy. Why? Because it's in the process. It is a process. Being. It's not a static thing. It's something that's dynamic and continuously manifesting. So when the Buddha said he experienced his being as a stream of being, it reminded me of the Western slogan or motto or whatever you want to call it, the saying, the Western saying, you can never put your foot in the same river twice. And so what that means is that we are dynamic as individuals. We're always changing. We're never staying the same. Moment to moment, we are actually different, because all of the experiences we have in this world, all of the experiences we have are making us who we are in this moment. And who we are in this moment is, in a way, not who we will be in the next moment. In other words, we have the capacity to change. We have almost an infinite capacity to change, to make our lives better, to make our minds better, to make our hearts softer, and so on. So in a way, according to some of the teachers who are teaching now, you may have heard of the great master Mingyur Rinpoche. He says if we look at the mind itself, it's a vast awareness. Your mind is a vast awareness. He said you're aware of what you see, you're aware of what you hear, taste, touch, and so on. But you can also be aware of that awareness. And by resting your mind in that awareness, you can see how your experience moment to moment changes you, and you change your experience. And so we become associated with and familiar with the process of being, and how we can change our internal habits of thinking. And by changing our internal habits of thinking, we can actually become better and different in every moment. So this talk about a reboot. It's really interesting because many people, maybe you folks here, are also familiar with the fact that Tibetans have very detailed teachings about what happens at death and after death, and about rebirth. And so the Tibetan teachings on death and rebirth are very famous. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a popular book even now. But Mingyur Rinpoche, I like the way he puts it. He says, oh, yes, Buddhism teaches rebirth and so on. But he said, you're actually being reborn every moment. You're actually experiencing rebirth every moment with every thought or story that you tell yourself that you buy into. You are giving yourself rebirth in a new story. So why couldn't you change that story? And that's the power of understanding the Buddha's teachings about mind and being. So these were the Buddha's teachings. But he didn't just teach it once, he taught it many times. And as he taught, his mode of expression evolved. And after establishing this idea of the stream of being and the value of the practice of meditation, because quieting the mind allows us to see the process of this stream of being. To see the process in real time, how we are, what we think, and so on. By doing quiet sitting meditation, we become aware of our inner processes in ways we never did before. And becoming aware of our inner processes, we gain the potential to change them. And to me, I guess you could say that's the good news of Buddhism, is that we have this capacity to change and develop. And then, so the Buddha in all gave 3 cycles of teaching in his 45 years of teaching. See, people ask me, is there a Buddhist Bible? And I say, kinda. If you imagined a bookshelf 6 feet tall and about 4 feet wide, that'd about do it. There are more than 200 volumes, not chapters, volumes in the Tibetan scripture and commentary. So it's a bit of a chunk. And this is why the Tibetans prefer to study commentaries to the scriptures themselves, because the scriptures are quite repetitive. But that's a whole nother talk for a whole nother day. But here we're talking about meditation. And the Buddha's teachings on meditation advanced. And after the Buddha passed away, about 100 years after the Buddha passed away, the teachings he gave, which had been maintained as an oral lineage, began to be written down. And so, yes, it actually happened that the Buddha had, as one of his disciples, someone with a photographic memory for words. And he could remember everything the Buddha taught. And he would be called upon to recite them once a year at a big council of all of the followers of the Buddha. So it's just a little bit about that. And so the scholars later systematized these teachings into what they called the 3 paths, P-A-T-H-S, the 3 paths. Or sometimes you could call them yana, Y-A-N-A, which is, I believe, the Sanskrit word, but I could be wrong. And these 3 paths are sometimes called the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. Hina means smaller, Maha means greater, and Vajra means indestructible. So the Hinayana is the path of individual liberation. It's small. The scope is small, just liberating ourselves from the suffering of samsara. Maha means liberating both ourselves and others from this cycle of suffering the Buddha called samsara. And then the Vajrayana is really just the Mahayana motivation of trying to liberate everyone, adding into it specific practices that are useful and helpful for bringing about liberation more quickly. And so you could say that at this center, the 3 yanas are important because they're in our name. Karma is our family name. We're of the Karma Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. But Tek Sum means 3 vehicles. Tek is vehicle, Sum is 3. Tek Sum. And so in this way, our name reflects the fact that the Buddha taught these 3 vehicles. And so, in any case, the practices that we do here are related to those 3 vehicles. Shamatha, basic sitting meditation, is our Hinayana practice, our individual liberation practice. And if anybody who's practiced shamatha or quiet sitting meditation and noticed a little bit of a relief from some of your greater sufferings, your greater emotional and mental sufferings, if you've had some relief from that, it's come from the meditation. And so that's like our own liberation, right? But we also, and so we talked about that in class 1. In class 2, we talked about compassion meditation, or sending and receiving, where we can use meditation to increase our compassionate feelings toward ourselves, because we need compassion too. We need to have compassion for ourselves and practice good caring for ourselves. And so that's why we taught, in the last class, we taught compassion meditation. And so then today, we are teaching the Vajrayana style of meditation. But there's not enough time in a class setting like this to truly teach it deeply and broadly. And so we'll probably have another set of classes, probably our Saturday classes, where we investigate each of these 3 kinds of meditation in more detail. But today, what I want to do is I want to give you a flavor of what it's like to do this meditation, this kind of meditation. Those of you who have studied Buddhism for some time know that the first 2 of the yanas, the Hinayana and the Mahayana, are sometimes called the causal paths or the causal vehicles. And the reason they're called causal is because the cause of them being effective is that we have Buddha nature. This is something we started talking about in the very first class, that we have a mind that has the capacity to know itself and to know itself completely. And this mind is basically capable of becoming Buddha. The Buddha was not some special being that came from somewhere. He said, when they asked him, "Are you one of the Hindu gods?" He said, "No." "Are you one of the Hindu gods?" "No." "Are you an ordinary person?" He said, "Well, I'm an enlightened person." I guess that puts him in the middle, right? So the Buddha was special in that way. But what he went on to say is that each of us has the same capacity. We all can become Buddha. Every single one of us can become a kind, loving, and wise individual. We all have the capacity for it. We just need to practice the meditations and the mind states that help us to become that person. And so that's why the first 2 yanas are called the causal vehicles, because the cause of them being effective is that we have Buddha nature. But in the teachings of these 2 vehicles, our Buddha nature is kind of like a hidden treasure. It's in there somewhere. As a treasure hidden under the ground. It's in there someplace, I don't know where, but I guess if we keep digging, maybe we'll find it. And that the path of Buddhism is to kind of scrape away all the dirt to find that treasure. And that's why in the Hinayana and the Mahayana, we practice good ethical behavior toward ourselves and good ethical behavior toward others, and kindness and wisdom toward ourselves and others, because that helps us to scoop away that dirt to reveal the treasure of our Buddha nature. Whereas in the Vajrayana, it's called the result vehicle or the resultant vehicle. The result vehicle. Why? Because in Vajrayana meditation, we treat Buddha nature as something that is self-evident and already revealed, which is a little bit hard for us to imagine. So your imagination gets used quite a bit in Vajrayana meditation, because we don't really see our Buddha nature right now, but we can imagine it. And that's why you have practices like Tara, like Chenrezig, where you imagine that you are a Buddha, or you imagine that you are a bodhisattva, and you imagine that you are a transcendent being for a nice short period of time. We'll call it a controlled period of time. You visualize yourself as a Buddha. And at the very end, you dissolve that into emptiness, rather like the sand mandalas. I don't know if anybody, has anybody here seen the sand mandalas, the Tibetan monk? Yeah, you have? Yeah, okay. Seen the monks make the sand mandalas, and then they immediately, after they consecrate them, they pretty much destroy them. And it's an acknowledgement that everything comes from emptiness and returns to emptiness. All of our imagined things disappear. And so this idea of our basic nature being beyond words, beyond imagination, beyond all of this is then acknowledged at the conclusion of one of these Vajrayana meditations. And so by doing these over and over again, we subtly learn using our imagination. We imagine what it's like to be a Buddha. We imagine what it's like to rest our mind in meditation. We imagine all of this. And our imagination helps us to take steps toward actually accomplishing that. It's just methodology. The three yanas all lead to Buddhahood. They just use different methodology. So we have to learn those methods. And there are two types of meditation taught in the Vajrayana. One is called the practices or path of liberation, of freedom or liberation. And the other set of practices are called the path of skillful means or skillful methods. And if you were here a couple weeks ago for Marcus Casey's teaching on the compassionate Bodhisattva Chenrezig, you heard all about the practice of Chenrezi, which is a practice of skillful means or skillful methods. And so since he covered it fairly well, I don't think I need to do that today. So instead, I'm going to talk about a meditation that we can do from the path of liberation side of things. Those of you who know the teachings here know that I extensively teach from this book, The Great Path of Awakening. The ideas that we're going to be practicing in our little imaginary meditation. We're going to do an imaginary meditation that lasts about 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. In just a few minutes, we're going to do it. We're going to use our imaginations and imagine something. And those of you who are familiar with the Great Path of Awakening know that there are some meditations from the Path of Liberation in this book, and it's actually a 4-part thing that I'm just going to walk you through intellectually for fun. Fun? Intellectual things are fun? Well, maybe not. Okay, maybe they're not fun, but I'll walk you through them. There are 4 slogans in this book that teach how we can think about our mind. Because right now, we think about our mind as our brain. We think about the mind as our brain, and our brain does this, and our brain does that, and it's our brain, and it's in our body, and our body is real, and so forth and so on. Well, this meditation this is not the one we're going to be doing, but the theoretical basis for our meditation is in these 4 statements. And the first of the 4 statements is, regard all phenomena as being like a dream. And basically what this means is that we reflect on the fact that we think stuff. And when we think stuff, we experience something. I don't know if anybody has experienced this, but I think you have, because when we think stuff, we can think of a time when we were really scared. And then it's almost like we get chills, right? Because we're like scared again, right? So in a way, our mind is very powerful to create experiences for us. Conversely, if we're having a really good day, even if somebody says something insulting or mean to us, we're going to kind of go, whatever, we're not going to care so much. But if we're in a really bad mood, even if somebody says good morning to us, we're going to be ready for a fight. And this tells us how powerful the mind really is. But the mind, and so that's why it says, regard all phenomena as being like a dream. It's not that these things around us are not real, because a physicist will tell you that all of this matter in this room is probably 90% empty space. But we still look at this glass of water and say, tasty beverage, So the fact that, covered my microphone. So the fact, I love being old. This is fun. So the fact that this glass of water is like 90% empty space and so on does not get in the way of the fact that it holds a tasty beverage. So, just like that, yeah, I know, just like that, in that same way, we can, I think I'm going to have to ditch this for a minute here. In that same way, the fact that everything that's happening is happening in our mind. Everything that's happening is happening in our mind. If we close our eyes and imagine this room, we've got an imaginary room in our mind, right? It's imaginary. It's not made of matter, right? And if you go to sleep and you dream this room, it's imaginary. It's happening in your mind. But what he's asking you to consider with this slogan, the author of the book is saying, consider the fact that while you are awake right now, while you're awake right now in this world, and seeing everything while you are awake, all of these pictures are appearing in your mind, just like a dream. The room that you are experiencing right now in your mind is like a dream. I would still not encourage you to walk into a pillar just to see if that's the case. And don't go play in traffic. It's definitely not a good idea. So, because physics is still real for us. So what we do is we just begin to, it says, by thinking along these lines, train yourself to have some feeling for looking at the world in this way, seeing the world as a world of experience rather than objective reality. We are experiencing things in our mind, and that is all we ever have. Yes, we can own things. Yes, we can have like inscribed watches and things with our name on it, but we don't really own those things. We own our idea of what those things are. We don't own people either, because we just own the idea of who they are to us. It's kind of trippy when you think about it. But that isn't where, they don't stop there. They say, now look, examine the nature of your unborn awareness, and then they have you go through a series of imaginary exercises where you imagine, you try to find your mind. What color is it? What shape is it? Where does it go? Where does it come from? Where does it go? And if you don't intellectualize, it's kind of fun. Because if you intellectualize, you'll go down a rabbit hole, like, my mind is in my brain is in my body, and then you'll like totally miss the point. Because even a corpse has a brain, but it doesn't have a mind. And this is a point we need to take some thought about, need to think about. So he's basically, the author of the text is basically saying that our mind is not a material thing. Our mind is not a material thing. And then we just have, and then the next two slogans just tell you, sit with that for a minute. Sit with that knowledge for a minute. Just sit with that. Just let your mind go, and just let your mind rest in its own natural awareness. Remember being aware of awareness? Yeah, okay. So that's the intellectual underpinning for what we're going to talk about next. So years ago, in the 1970s, a Tibetan Lama came to the United States named Kalu Rinpoche. And his rebirth is now very popular online. You'll see his Facebook page has lots of followers and so on. And he's a really, really, really good teacher. And his previous incarnation was a really, really, really good teacher. And my teacher received teachings from him. And I actually got to meet him. He died at the age of 84 in the 1980s. And he was remarkable. He was like another Milarepa, living in the mountains and practicing deep meditation. And he comes to the West and he gives these incredibly intelligent and really revelatory teachings to us, average folks. And so, in a way, he decided to talk about the intellectual basis for all of these things, but instead he said, Just close your eyes and listen and do what I say. And then he walked them through this meditation on the nature of our experience. And so I'm going to do that just for fun, and we're going to do like maybe 5 minutes of a guided meditation if you're up for it. If you're not, that's quite all right. You can kind of keep your eyes open and just relax. But he said, yeah, I can like teach and talk about this and talk and talk and talk, but he says it's more fun if you just try it on for size. So we're going to try this on for size. This is a meditation called Meditation on the 5 Elements. Now you might say, what does that have to do with the mind? Well, that's because everything that exists in the outer world as real stuff actually kind of exists in our inner mind too, but not as real stuff, just as ideas. And when you get into all of the Vajrayana teachings, they'll even go farther. They'll say, oh, the 5 elements, which are earth, water, fire, air, and space. They're all reflected in your body. You know, you've got like solid, your body has got bones in it. That's the earth element. It's got liquid in it. That's the water element. It's got heat. That's the fire element. It's got air. That's your breath. And it's got empty space, which my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, said was, all the spaces between the organs in the body. And I'm like, okay, fine. So, but there's a way to use imaginary shapes to represent everything that is solid, everything that is liquid, everything that is made of air and fire and space. So we're gonna do a little progressive meditation now on the elements and just see how you like, if you can connect to what he's talking about. I'm going to try to reestablish the mask. Wish me luck. I have a health condition that encourages me to wear my mask. All right. And this was taught to me by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. But I did find a version of it online, and I will share that in the comments section of the YouTube and Facebook videos that we're going to make here. So first, I'd like to start by saying, let's just start by sitting quietly for about a minute, just letting our mind come to rest on our breath. That's basic quiet sitting meditation. So we'll start with about a minute of that. We'll form the physical preparation of sitting in meditation posture, and we'll apply the mental preparation by making the aspiration that we will meditate for the benefit of all suffering beings. And with that, we'll do a little breath awareness meditation, being aware of the breath as it comes in and the breath as it goes out. Okay, now I'm going to describe some visualizations. Typically, these would be done for several minutes apiece, but we'll start with less. And as with any meditation technique, when thoughts interrupt, which they will, simply regain your composure, notice the distraction, touch it with your attention, let it go, and return to the visualization with no judgment or further discussion of the matter. We're going to be in a no judgment zone here. Okay, if you'd like to participate in the visualization, you can close your eyes and imagine. We're going to imagine a golden square a square made of golden light, somewhat yellow, somewhat golden, bright. This is of the nature of the element earth, with the general concept that it includes all physical aspects of the world, being contained within it, including yourself. So hold a visualization of a golden square. Then the golden square, you can imagine that it dissolves into the concept of the water element, which will be visualized as a white circle made of light. A circle made of white light. And then visualize just that circle of white light. Next, dissolve the white circle and water element into the element of fire, which is represented by a red triangle made of light. The white circle dissolves, becomes the red triangle, and we think just of the red triangle. Next, the red triangle of the element of fire dissolves into the air element, which is represented by a semicircle of green light, bright green light. The fire element dissolves into air, represented by a green half semicircle. Next, we dissolve the green semicircle of the air element into the space element, represented by a sphere of blue light. The green semicircle disappears into the blue sphere of space. The last part of the visualization, the blue sphere of light dissolves into a clear and colorless sphere that's like a crystal sphere or a water bubble. And so you think about this crystal sphere in front of you. Next, the crystal sphere slowly begins to grow. It expands, and it becomes larger and larger, and it envelops yourself and everything, this sphere. In fact, this sphere grows to be 100 arm spans, which means it's very, very big. It fills all of space. And then it disappears completely, like a rainbow dispersing into space. So that's the short visualization exercise on the 5 elements. I remember when this was taught to us for the first time. I remember it very clearly. When the sphere got bigger, it amused me for some reason. But I really enjoyed the meditation a lot, and I had been seeking my notes for this, and I never did find them. I know I've got them somewhere, but then I saw this technique described, and I thought to myself, this is a good one. I think I'll share this, because I have, in a way, you could say I have the transmission of this from my teacher, who received it directly from Kalu Rinpoche. So the transmission part is good, So because of time, believe it or not, we don't have time for questions today, and I regret that. But it was very important to me to be able to tell you about the upcoming Tibetan New Year celebrations, which will be starting in a way, we're going to start this afternoon at 1:15 with the protector chant. They always do a protector chant at the end of the year. And so we're going to do one from 1:15 today through about 2:30, maybe something like that. So you can go grab a snack and come back, and just observe and meditate while we're chanting, or you can wish us well and dedicate the merit of our practice and go have a nice lunch. Go have a nice lunch. Either way, you'll be with us in spirit, and we'll be thinking about you. I hope this has been a helpful set of classes on meditation in the 3 yanas. And as I say, we can have more discussion about it, because I think we will do a Saturday program on the meditation in the 3 yanas to review everything and to practice everything. I think that would be fun. And so we'll try to arrange that for everyone. So because of the lateness of the time, we'll have to stop here and dedicate our merit. But I hope that these classes have been of interest to you, and I hope that they help you in your own life of meditation, and that you're able to have some confidence and faith in your own ability to practice shamatha meditation at the very least. And perhaps some curiosity about compassion meditation and some curiosity about Vajrayana meditation. So we'll gather all of this together. Because of time, we'll just recite it once in English. And it starts with the words, "By this merit," and we gather together all the goodness that we've ever done in all of our many, many lifetimes and all that we're going to do in the future, and we dedicate it to the liberation of all suffering beings, of which there are so many. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is. Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way. And all the bodhisattvas that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next week. So drive safely, and we'll see you next year. Thanks, sound department. You guys are the